we did try it. Everyone loved it. We like poured it out in three different cups, all three flavors, and we all tried it. We just like took it at the same time, like gave reviews, and it was funny seeing people's like different flavors, which one they liked the best. I personally like chocolate. I'm such a like a chocolate person, such a sweet tooth. And then my coworker Noah, who he hosts the podcast as well for our partner side. He was also chocolate lover. And then our other coworker Kurt, he really loved the vanilla. So
Oh,
it was
nice.
fun. I gave
Okay.
them one of each. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah. It is always cool to see what people drift towards. We have a lot of people. I'm a strawberry milk person personally, and I was
You
growing up.
are
And so
okay.
there's so few plant-based or animal-free strawberry milk brands on the market. And so like a lot of people are like, finally, I've been waiting like 20 years to be able to drink strawberry milk again.
Yes. Yeah. I actually, okay, maybe this is giving too much, but I like growing up, I don't know what it is about me, but I was just like, I never really liked the taste of milk, like
Mhm.
any milk. It was just, I was like, oh yeah, it's all right. Like cereal, I would have dry, like whatever. I was like, okay, maybe weird. Yes. But now, like as an adult, I'm like, oh my God, I love it. And so trying it, yeah, is definitely fun. Interesting. Do you think like with strawberry, just because you grew up with strawberry, that's why like that's your favorite?
I think so because it like we see this happen all the time when we do taste tests where somebody will take a sip and you can just tell that they've been like instantly transported, back to the 90s or the early 2000s or whenever they grew up. And strawberry gives me that sort of like transportative moment, and so it's nice. Yeah, it's just as much about the nostalgia and the memories, I think, as it is the flavor and texture and things like that.
Yeah, that's so fun. That's definitely I see that coming across in the branding, which we'll talk about as well once we got off of the flavor test. But yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Like just the we actually interviewed two perfume brands. So Define Me Fragrances and Dossier, and they were both saying how like obviously your senses are really connected to your memories, right? Like that's how we progress throughout the world. Evolutionarily, you just needed that as a hunter gatherer, right? Like
Yeah.
so it's so funny that it's like, oh, you're drinking something like milk, which is really nostalgic. As a kid, you're told like drink milk and you'll get strong and your bones
Yeah, yeah,
will
of
won't
course.
break and stuff like that. And like same thing with cereal too. Like it's just a couple of these different, I'm trying to think of other examples of food that's like really nostalgic for like as kids, like candy, the same thing too.
Yeah, even like
Um,
soda pop and like it's why brands like
yes,
Olipop and Poppy have been doing so well because they've managed to like capture the nostalgia without the sugar and without the corn syrup and without all of the stuff that we left behind for a good reason.
yes, exactly. Those are also perfect examples. Thank you. Yeah, it's like as an adult, the things that you care about, leaving out all the bad ingredients that you don't want to consume. So it's perfect. And yeah, the nostalgia, the branding, it coincides so well. And I think that lends into success as a brand because if it makes sense from a messaging standpoint and it correlates with your own experience, it's like, oh yeah, that checks out.
Definitely.
But more about that later. So let's jump into it. I know we picked it up with starting with the samplers, and thank you again for sending that. Super
Yeah, of
super
course.
nice. I know we enjoyed it, but it would be great to have you give like your background, introduce yourself. I'm so happy you're here with us, Luke.
Yeah, me too. Thank you for having me. Yeah, my background. So I've been in, I guess, creative and brand marketing for my whole career. I started out in the social and digital marketing space. I graduated in like 2010. So it was like right as Facebook was
Wow.
just starting to become a major marketing tool for brands, but it was also a time when brands were getting onto social media for the very first time. And so very interesting time to sort of be entering the job market. And so all of the jobs, it seemed like back then, at least from a marketing perspective, were social media marketing jobs for big brands. And so I did that for about 5 years. I worked at a company called VaynerMedia in the very early days, which was interesting and exciting, and I learned a lot. From there, like sort of in the mid 2010s, you had this like big wave of like digital media
Mhm.
publishers that were sort of like blowing up, the like BuzzFeeds and Refinery 29s of the world. And so I was really interested in that space. I was a little burnt out and jaded, to be frank, with, big brand marketing. And so decided I
Mm.
wanted to, pivot to digital media. And so I joined a very small startup called Futurism, which was a digital media publication and still is, that writes about sort of like future science and technology trends. And so everything
Cool.
from artificial intelligence to lab grown meats, to machine learning, to self-driving cars, to blockchain at the time, just like trying to help demystify these technologies that were promising to change our lives in major ways. In some cases have, in some cases haven't, looking back now years later. And so I ran the creative team there for a couple of years, which was a very fun time. We got to produce documentaries, and we made a comic strip brand that eventually got published. We built a weighted blanket brand called Gravity, all
Whoa.
internally. And so it's just like, it was that time where digital media companies were just figuring out how to make money outside of just like advertising, because at the time ad dollars and revenue were sort of shrinking for digital media companies. So I learned a lot then. Decided through the weighted blanket and Gravity work that I did that I actually really liked building and scaling consumer brands. And so decided that I wanted to learn a little bit more about what that looks like. And so I got to work for a company called Seed, which is a probiotic startup run by an amazing marketer named Eric Katz. Learned so much from her. I was at Calm for a little while. Got to learn from Michael Acton Smith, and Katie Schill, who's the leads marketing there and is a former colleague of mine. And then I went to Twitter, pre Elon Musk stuff, and got
Timely,
to
I was
work on,
gonna say.
yes, and got to work on the brand strategy team there. And then this opportunity for Tomorrow Farms and Bored Cow came up, and I had been sort of desperately looking to get into the climate space because I wanted my values, to align with the work that I do on a day-to-day basis. And it's obviously such a big and important problem. And so, sort of decided that I wanted to dedicate like the better part of the rest of my career to helping work on solutions for the climate and biodiversity crisis. And so I didn't think it was going to be food that was sort of the way into that. But as I've learned about the food system and how much, disruption and change is needed there, it became clear that it was a really good way to get involved. And so, yeah, I feel very fortunate to be doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, there's so much to dive into there, and I love that so much. So, okay, quick question for you with like you said when you first were looking for jobs like in social media, you felt like everything was like social media management. Do you think that's changed? Because I feel like there's still such like I feel like any jobs out there, it's like any people I see on LinkedIn who are hiring, it's like social media management or content creator
Yeah.
for specific platforms. Most of the time it's TikTok.
Yeah.
Um, what would you say to that?
It's a great question. I don't think it's changed overall. I think at the time it was such a novel thing to do, and you had
Mm,
all of these like seasoned brand leaders who had been building brands, primarily through traditional channels for their whole careers, and suddenly, they had to figure out how to translate that to social media. And so of course it made sense to go to young people, who sort of are fluent in social media to do that. And so I think that still happens today, but I also think that social media marketing is seen as a much more important and critical pillar of any brand's success in the world. And so, yeah, and so I think it's the same, but I actually think I don't know, I think it's viewed as more reputable now, and I think people understand how hard it is, and
yep.
and and how rare it is to be great at it.
Okay. Cool. Cool. I love that response. And I completely agree. I do think there's way more acceptance for the importance of organic growth and branding and messaging and your presence online. And as you were speaking, I was just tying like the correlation because a lot of the times on this podcast, it just comes up naturally like TikTok. I'm fascinated. I think everyone is kind of fascinated by the platform. And so we chat about it a lot, but I kind of see like the same thing happening on a little bit of a smaller scale for the platform itself. Cause I feel like now people are like, oh, there's time and time again, like different brands, different, apps, even like Duolingo they're seeing success on TikTok. And I think it's some of that, like, it's not as reputable right now, like Instagram, Facebook,
Yeah.
LinkedIn, Pinterest, like those have been around for a minute. And
Yeah.
so the same like transition or cycle that you were saying when social media management first kind of started making its way around, and now it's, you know, years out, more reputable. I think the same thing is happening with TikTok and
Totally.
um like all of that. So it's
Yeah.
really interesting. It's like history repeats itself, right?
And we're at the point now where like even Facebook is seen as almost a legacy platform, you know?
Yep.
It's like everyone has been on Facebook forever now, and you know, obviously young people are shifting away from it. And so it's funny to, you know, I think now a lot of brands are looking specifically for people who are fluent in TikTok because, you know, they came up in the age of Facebook and Instagram, and TikTok is just a completely different culture and a completely different content creation style and completely different social norms and rules. And you know, it's hard to learn those things if you didn't grow up with them. And so yeah, it's always easier to just hire smart driven people who like want to, you know, pursue a career in marketing and also happen to know these platforms fluently, you know. And so it's a great way into the industry for sure. Although
Yeah.
I do agree that like TikTok and TikTokers do need to be respected more because it is hard to do TikTok right,
Yeah, yeah. And two, it's humbling, you know, like
for sure.
you like anyone who is trying to make content, sometimes it's like you can say you can have like a piece of content and you're like, oh, I really think this is gonna go over so well. And then it doesn't,
Yeah,
and you're like, oh my God.
yeah,
And then random stuff, it goes really well. And you're like, well, there you go. Like
yeah,
wasn't anticipating it.
yeah.
Um,
It's a little bit of a
yeah,
black box for sure, which is why you
yes.
need to just like experiment, you know,
Yeah, you can't have a ton of pride, I think,
for sure.
in that role, especially e-commerce too. Like D2C, things are just changing, I feel like,
So
so quickly.
fast.
So
Yep.
yeah, and marketing. So it's wonderful. Okay, so we talked about your background, which is a great background, by the way, too. Like Calm app and Twitter and Tomorrow Farms and Bored Cow now. It's so amazing. So give us an overview of both Tomorrow Farms and then Bored Cow as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So Tomorrow Farms is there's a lot of ways we describe it depending on who we're talking to. The way that I like to describe it to the average person is that Tomorrow Farms is sort of like the parent company for the future of food. And so if you think
Love
about
it.
like the logo marks you grew up with, the General Mills and the Kellogg's, you know, the Nestle's of the world, like those back then were like what people looked for, you know, when they were looking for products, you know, to make sure that they were buying something, you know, with a certain standard of quality and flavor, et cetera. We think that those monograms are a little outdated, frankly. And you know, there's this entire new generation of food science and technology that is coming up really, really quickly. You've seen it with plant-based food science. You're seeing it now with precision fermentation, animal-free dairy, which is obviously what we're doing with Bored Cow. You're seeing it with cell-based meat. The first cell-based meat company just got FDA approval in the United States today, and so it's
Whoa,
happening
look at
really,
that.
really quickly. And there's going to be all sorts of, and there are all sorts of like food science companies and amazingly smart people who are figuring this out. But I think what we've seen is most of them do not have, you know, if they have the this sort of scientific expertise and technological expertise, they don't always have the sort of branding, marketing expertise in terms of like, how do I take this technology and actually turn it into a brand and a product that people are going to want to buy in a grocery store? And so we sort of fill in that gap for those partners. And so, you know, we are looking for the next big sort of like food science technologies and opportunities that will help create a like better, kinder, greener food system, and specifically, you know, lowering greenhouse gas emissions, lowering land use, lowering water use, obviously promoting animal welfare. And we are, you know, sort of the commercial arm that helps turn those ingredients and technologies into brands and products that people will love. And so Bored Cow is the first of those brands underneath the Tomorrow Farms umbrella. And we obviously worked with Perfect Day, who have sort of pioneered this animal-free milk protein that we use as the base of our animal-free dairy milk, which is what Bored Cow is.
Yes, that's such a good summary. Good job. I
Thanks.
feel like listeners will be able to like perfect correlation between, like the big logo brands from, I don't even know, like 60s, 70s. I don't know when they were founded, but like the Kellogg's of the world, and then how that's a parent company, and then what you all are trying to do with Tomorrow Farms and Bored Cow. And so now let's get into a little bit more about Bored Cow. Like we've touched upon a couple of times, animal-free dairy milk. It sounds like you read it, and
Yeah.
it
It's
sounds like
nonsense, right?
a
When you first hear it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's like
like a
that's not possible.
paradox. Yeah,
A
I almost said
paradox,
on
an
yeah,
oxymoron. Yes, all of the
yes,
above.
exactly. Which the first time I read it, and it's great because it like captures your attention. You're like,
Yeah,
what
yeah. It
did I just read?
always leads to curiosity, you know.
Yep. So I applause there. Good job. And like, so we were also talking about just the branding. And these are more just from briefly, anyone who's listening, like I encourage you to go check out your website because you get everything that you are supposed to get as a consumer, or this is my assumption, like that you're supposed
Yeah.
to get or that you guys are trying to portray very quickly. And I love we've talked about it a little bit, the nostalgia. And so I would love to go into that, like
Yeah.
learn more just about the background, where those ideas came from. Like the branding is adorable.
Thanks.
So yeah, I just want to know everything, like the ins and
Yeah.
outs.
Yeah. I think I think always the best place to start is explaining what animal-free dairy is and why it is. And I think
hmm
we'll move into the actual branding decisions from there. But I think as a baseline, animal-free dairy is an oxymoron. Up
Yep.
until just, less than 10 years ago, really, anything that was dairy was not animal-free. And anything that was
hmm
animal-free was not dairy, right? Those two things were incompatible because dairy has always come from cows, as we all know. And so what has changed over the last 10 years is that we're actually using a technology that's been around for about 50 years called precision fermentation. And this is a process by which we can teach tiny invisible microflora how to ferment different things. 50 years ago, we started to use it to produce insulin. As most people know, insulin, historically comes from pigs, but human insulin, which is something that obviously is much more compatible with our bodies, is something that we learned to teach microflora how to make. And so, most insulin now is made through this process of precision fermentation. From there, it was actually cheese making that started using precision fermentation. There's an enzyme called rennet that traditionally comes from the stomach linings of like small cows and other kind of ruminants.
hmm
And so now most cheesemakers use precision fermentation to make enzymes without needing to slaughter a baby animal in order to get those enzymes, right? And so
Love that.
now we can use it to produce animal proteins for food making. And so Perfect Day, who's our technology partner with Bored Cow, has figured out a way to make milk protein, specifically whey protein, which is one of the two main proteins found in cow's milk, through fermentation instead of by milking a cow. And so, and then, the follow-up question is always like, why? Why are you going through
Right.
all of that effort to produce something that already exists? And the answer, of course, is that, our food system accounts for around 1/3 of global greenhouse gas emissions. It's responsible for up to 80% of the deforestation that's happened over the last century. It's responsible for about 70% of all freshwater withdrawals. And most of that is because of the meat and dairy industry, which is an incredibly energy and resource intensive industry that also produces a lot of emissions, and specifically methane. And so, by making milk protein with microflora, we can generate up to 97% fewer greenhouse gas emissions, use up to 99% less water, and up to 60% less non-renewable energy than milk protein that is sourced from cow's milk. And so, obviously those are enormously There's enormous
Big numbers.
reductions in,
Yep.
in those sort of important environmental factors. And so the reason that we're making animal-free dairy is because we love milk and we love dairy products. We love how they taste. We love how they feel. We love how they act. We love the nutrition they provide, but we don't love, the impact they have on animals and the environment. And so animal-free dairy allows us to keep eating and drinking the dairy products we love, without, this sort of enormous environmental impact that, the meat and dairy industry and specifically factory farms now have. And so that's the background. It's always important to explain it.
Yeah, I
And
love it. Thank you.
so we take that milk protein and we build a milk alternative around it. And so what you end up with is sort of a hybrid dairy plant-based product, right? Where you have animal-free milk protein that's identical to the to the milk protein found in cow's milk, to the degree that if you have a dairy allergy, you actually can't drink Bored Cow. But then we add plant-based ingredients around that to sort of replicate, the rich, creamy flavor of dairy. And so you end up with a milk alternative that is much closer from a taste, texture, and nutrition profile perspective to regular milk than most, if not all, milk alternatives on the market today.
Right. That's really cool. So I actually took a class on just like the environmental impact that and this was way back when, but like the environmental impact that your consumption has like on just the world in general. And I remember I was like, one of the things I took from that class was like just the amount of methane that is released into the environment and like how little one person's consumption, like you don't have to consume too much to really make like a big impact on the world.
Yeah,
and
totally.
So I love hearing you like walk through that, because I think a lot of the times, like I'm sure you relate to this, is like education with the consumer is really important. It's one of the things we see time and time over with Malomo is the more yes. Yeah. And we're gonna we'll dive into that a little bit later, but that's really like the key component, because you say that to a reader or a consumer and what they're reading about Bored Cow and they're like, that makes sense. Like that is, why would you not go with an alternative if you can,
Yeah, totally.
if you can like drink dairy milk. So thank you so much for walking us through it. It's a great background. Yeah.
So now let's move into the brand. So how do we get from, okay, we're going to make animal-free dairy milk to we're going to call it Bored Cow and we're going to create all of these quirky, strange cow creatures that are going to
I love them so much
for our product. So we worked with a really amazing branding agency called Manufacture. They're based in the Raleigh-Durham area. And we were looking for a very collaborative relationship. I think going in, we knew that we wanted to build a nostalgic brand that both sort of like harkened back to the golden age of like cereal mascots and like back of the cereal box games and mazes, and things like that, that sort of we grew up with, but also a product that could become in 20 years, the brand and the product that today's kids look back on and say, I grew up with Bored Cow and I'm now nostalgic for Bored Cow. And so looking ahead to try to create a brand that is nostalgic in the future at the same time. And so we knew that we wanted to build this like character driven, immersive brand universe. I'm a writer by trade. And so like, I just wanted to make a universe that I could play into, to be honest, but I also knew that like, that was something that if you did it the right way, that people would fall in love with. And so worked with Manufacture, and they worked with an amazing illustrator named Katie Perez, who drew all of the cow characters and universe herself. We went through a whole bunch of different types of cartoon cows. I could show you a deck that we have that's like all the other different types of cow characters that we explored, but it was sort of like the simple, round, sort of minimalist, quirky cow that I think really sort of like won all of our hearts. And so, so we went with that, and then we decided to create archetypes based on, the story of Bored Cow is that for 10,000 years, cows have been working for us. These days, they're working in factory farms, producing milk for us. They're spending very little time outside, very little time with their calves. And we think that's wrong. We think that's sad. And we believe cows should be free to do whatever they want. We believe that cows should be bored. We think that bored cows are happier cows. And so, we've sort of taken that idea and run with it. And so we started to think about like, what would cows do if they had all the free time in the world? And then we asked ourselves that question, what would we do if we had all the free
All
time in the
right.
world? What did we want to be when we grew up? And it was, things like, I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to be, a rock star. I wanted to be a professional skateboarder. And we're like, well, let's just like match those up. Let's make the cows sort of extensions of our
Yeah.
inner child, exactly. And so
Yeah.
that's how we got to where we did.
Yeah. I mean, it's really cute. I'm looking at the packaging right now. So I held it up like the chocolate. I know they have names too.
Yes, that's Clara.
Okay, Clara, thank you.
Short for
So on the
Clarabelle, of
on the
course.
chocolate. What's that?
I said Clara, short for Clarabelle, of course. All
Oh,
all based on traditional dairy cow names.
I love it. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh, I didn't even make that connection. So I'm so happy you just made that
yeah.
connection for
There's a
me.
lot of little details like that that are fun.
But that's like, okay, so slight tangent. I love like little Easter eggs or like FOMO marketing. I'm a total sucker for anything like that. Like I love the Marvel universe because of that reasoning.
Yeah,
And Taylor Swift. Like
yeah.
they're when you're looking at Easter eggs and FOMO marketing, they're right in the way for
Yeah,
that.
it's just great
Um,
storytelling, right? It's like the best books are the ones that have the most vivid, exciting details and allow you to make connections in your brain. And you're right. Taylor
yeah.
Swift is amazing at that. Like it's one of the
Yes.
reasons she's, one of the biggest stars in the world for sure.
Yes, exactly. So like I love just like things like that where you can tie them together. And it's like just even down to the smallest little detail of like all the bored cows have names and they have this storyline. Like I know there's the graphics that you all have on your website, like just
Yeah,
telling their actual story and how you came up with the name bored cow. Again, I'm a sucker for that, but it pays off because it pays into that entertaining, right? Like that entertainment factor. Of the nostalgia. It's like you can play the games while you're waiting for your board cow to arrive. Like I noticed that, and with the pack as well, is like all the different little pamphlets of games that you can play, which
yeah.
you better believe I was playing them.
I love it. I love it. That makes us so happy to hear. Those were very fun to put together. Our former art director Devin Sullivan did all of that, and she's amazing. We had a lot of fun.
Yeah. And I love it. And like the site too, it's animated. So like you're going on the site, you're like, it feeds into, this is one of the reasons to going back to TikTok, like, and just short form video. Like that's why people are resonating with that content, is because at the same time that it's informational or informative, it's also entertaining.
Totally.
And if you can get them coupled together, like you've won the lottery, right? And so like Bored Cow, I know from a company standpoint, we always say it's like one of our like beloved tracking pages because it just looks so pretty, it's so cute, and that really speaks wonders to your guys' branding, the
Yeah.
messaging, and the details that you go into for each and every flavor in cow and storyline. So it's really cool.
Awesome. I'm so glad you think so. Yeah. I mean, we've just had the most amazing, brilliant, creative, executional partners, both internally and externally, who've just like totally understood the mission and the assignments, and we're truly just like excited to work on a brand that they could just play around with, and they could sort of like let their inner child out. Cause that's the whole idea of like, Bored Cow being made for kids and kids at heart. And it also applies to, the people that we work with, and it applies to us as a team as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, from my perspective, which take it with a grain of salt, but it comes across. And so with that, I wanted to ask, so I know that, well, let me first speak to this. So the graphics, like the cartoon aspect of it, on your website, you have, I'm forgetting the two that, but it's like Our Story, right?
Yeah.
Is one of them.
Yep.
And it kind of tells like origin points, right? But it's in like a nostalgic cartoon layout. It's not all copy like a regular
Yeah.
blog or anything like that. So how did you like come up with that idea? I know you
Yeah.
mentioned maybe is someone else a previous.
Yeah. So I was at my previous one of my previous companies, Futurism. I launched a cartoon brand. I worked with a really amazing illustrator back then, and we did single panel cartoons, and it resonated so strongly, and it became such a powerful medium to both create political commentary in a way that was not divisive, but also in a way that was entertaining and really sticky and really shareable and things like that. And so, through that work that I did at Futurism coming here, I was like, I want to bring some of that magic here. And I want to be able to tell our story in a way that is so simple that anybody of any age could sort of read through this story and understand the problem that we're trying to solve, the simplicity really of the solution when you really boil it down, and the world that we can create if we're successful in our mission to scale that solution and solve the problem. And so a long form comic strip, I think, was the best way to do that in the most accessible way to the most amount of people. And so I worked with Katie Perez, the illustrator, on it, and we sort of partnered in terms of putting that story together. But I think it's our manifesto in a comic form.
Yeah, I didn't even think about the advantages to having it be a cartoon. And like you said, for it not to be like a divisive piece of content that you're rolling out. Like that didn't even cross my mind, because truly it was like, oh my God, this is adorable. Like I want to keep reading.
Yeah.
And like see what ends up, like where the cows end up, right? So that's a really cool like insider viewpoint to have, that it's like, oh, the part of the purpose is that it is unifying and kind of brings people in rather than, of course, keeps them on the outside.
Exactly. And it is a very divisive product. And we understand why, people have very strong connections and bonds and memories built around meat and dairy. Most of us, the vast majority of us, grew up, eating and drinking meat and dairy products, and many of us still do. And it's, this idea that, oh, you can't eat that anymore because it's killing the planet, is there's also often a very strong defensive reaction to that. And it's, again, it's understandable why. And so figuring out, okay, how do we illuminate the issues of meat and dairy in a way that doesn't make people feel bad about themselves, but also I think ultimately makes them, open to alternatives that sort of solve some of those problems. So yeah, that was part of the reason that we chose a comic.
Okay. Yes. We're going to dive into how you actually educate people in a little bit, but I do want to ask. And so if you're not allowed to share this information, by all means don't, but you guys kind of have like your core 3 flavors. So I was just wondering, is there any plans around like launching alternative flavors? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Are you allowed to tell us more?
This is my favorite question right now, because I'm actually allowed to share it now. We are launching. We're launching an original milk, which is to say a plain milk, in early next year. So
wow. Okay.
Yeah, in the February to March window, and so that is going to be. It's an improved label. We've cleaned up, the label even more. It is truly a perfect substitute for regular dairy milk. And so, we started with chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry because they were ready to go, last year. And we wanted to get something out into the market just so we could start telling our story. We were the first animal-free dairy milk in the market at that time, which was important to us. And so we've been working really hard, since then for about a year to perfect the original milk, which we think will be what you put in your coffee and what you cook with and what you bake with and what you pour in your cereal and what you drink a big glass of in the morning. And we'll sort of, all of the things that you love about dairy milk, this milk will be able to accomplish those things. We also have some other non-milk dairy products in the market as well, which we'll be sharing more information about soon. But yes, Bored Cow will not just remain a animal-free dairy milk brand, but we'll be making some other dairy products too, which we're excited about.
Okay, well, we'll have to keep our eyes peeled for that, for those updates, because that will be very exciting. Thank you for sharing, and I love that it was your favorite question up until this point. Hopefully, we can top that. That'll be really cool. Okay, cool. Yeah. So Q1. All right, big stuff. like as if you guys don't have enough on your plate, you
I
know.
know.
Um, okay, so as promised, let's talk about educating customers.
Yeah.
So we've chatted about a little bit about the, you know, from the consumer standpoint, getting the product actually in your hands, and you know the gains that come along with them, post-purchase emails as well. But let's start out with like social media
Yeah.
presence and sharing your story on social, like organically, so like through the website, just the
Yeah.
marketing strategy overall. Can you tell us a little bit, can you inform us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's really all about, and this is such a buzzword, and so I'm sorry to speak it out loud, but it's
Lay it
all
on me.
about edutainment.
Oh,
I can't even say it
I
without
thought
like
I was gonna
laughing,
hear
but
storytelling. I was
it's
like,
such
go
a
ahead.
useful word. I mean, it's the best word, unfortunately, to describe what we do, which is like, you know, what's so difficult about what we're doing is, we are not just trying to introduce a new brand, or a new product to people. We're trying to introduce an entire new way of making food to people. And so it isn't as simple as saying, hey, if we were an oat milk brand, we could just say like, hey, we're so and so, and we're making oat milk. And of course, you know what oat milk is, but it's like, hey, we're Bored Cow and we're making animal-free dairy milk. And the 100% of the time, or I would say 99.9, because there's some people who have been following, animal-free dairy for a long time and have been really excited about it, and those people are awesome. But most people are, have no idea what that means, right? And they want to know, which is a good thing. They're curious, but it also means that you're not just explaining a brand and you're not just explaining a product, but you're also explaining an entire new method of making food, all with a very short span of time, given attention spans and the average length of successful content on social media. You have very little time to explain all of that to people, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
we do that a lot of different ways. We have great interesting recipe content where we have really inventive vegan friendly recipes that sort of utilize the product, which is a great way in for people. They get excited about the recipe, and then they obviously see that Bored Cow is a primary component of that. But I think what's also very interesting is we work with a creator named Farmer Nick, who is a big vegan influencer and creator on Instagram and TikTok. He's amazing. You should go follow him if you don't
I was
already.
gonna say, I'm gonna check him out.
Yeah, and he's both an investor in the company as well as a creative partner for us. And we've developed a series together where it's sort of just like a lighthearted comedy series, starring a dairy cow in a cheap mascot costume, who sort of just like is freed from the factory farm and is trying to figure out how the world works, while also trying to get people excited about animal-free dairy. And they're 30 to 60-second skits, and not only are they just like really funny and really relatable and really accessible, but there's always education baked in there. But it's education that you don't realize is happening to you, because you're just enjoying the story that's being told, you're enjoying the jokes that are being told, but you're also learning alongside it. And I think that represents, and we're still learning, right? There's still we still have a lot of work to do to sort of figure out like what are the perfect ways to tell our story and educate online. But those are some of the early successes that we've had, and we're really excited about them because, again, they're fun to make and they're fun to watch, but also they get the message across in a way that sticks with people.
Yeah, I love that. I'm gonna have to, because I was looking at your guys' Instagram and TikTok before, and you're right. Like you don't really realize you're being educated while you're watching the content. And so to have like, I love that you also said edutainment, like that perfectly fits.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so real quick, do you tend to get a lot of like questions from consumers who like just through social media or to your website or like email or anything, just asking for more details?
Yes, definitely on social media. I think one of the things that we've realized, and again, I understand that people have very little time, and they're like they have a lot of content that they want to watch, and so oftentimes somebody will see, one of our advertisements, whether it's a video or a short animation or even a still, and they'll read and you can only communicate so much information there. You cannot tell the whole story of animal-free dairy in a single like 15, 30-second Instagram or TikTok ad. And so, what you hope is that people will click through to your website and read everything and do all the research, and there are people who do that, and they're awesome. But most people don't have the time, or that they don't take the time to do that. And so they'll ask questions that are easily answerable if you go to the website, but of course they don't want to leave the social platform. And so, we spend a lot of our time answering the same questions again and again and again and again. And we have an amazing customer experience team that, is happy to do that. And to, you really just have to have the same conversation 1,000 times, a week or a month.
Yeah.
And you just have to accept that's consumer behavior. They want to have a conversation with you in feed. They don't want to leave to go educate themselves. And I will say, again, there are exceptions to that rule, but largely that is what we see.
Yeah, I am 99% confident that any other customer support or service or success team would say the same thing. Like, you just have to get comfortable. So I'm by no means surprised to hear that. But yeah, that really checks out, because like you said, you're trying to entertain about like an industry and a new way of doing something and creating something, as well as your product specifically, how it differs from normal dairy milk to dairy-free alternatives, and everything in between. So that's really interesting. Kudos to your customer support success team.
Seriously.
And responding to consumer questions, because you're exactly right. Like, people don't want to leave whatever feed, whatever app they're in. Or majority of people don't want to do that. So major props to them.
Yeah, for sure.
So, okay, cool. We've chatted about the marketing side, the kind of the pre-purchase acquisition side of education. Can we talk about the post-purchase side of it? So I've, of course, seen this, having received my order and tracking emails and whatnot. So can you walk us through how that education differs, if it does differ, from like the pre-purchase side of things?
Yeah, I think right now we spent the last 6 months mostly just learning ourselves who the buyer of animal-free dairy milk is, right? We obviously had our theories and our hypotheses about who we thought it would be, certainly environmentally conscious people, folks on some sort of plant-based journey, people who are starting to wake up, to the impact of, all of their behaviors, but especially the food system on the planet and their health and on animals, etc. But the question, like, why did they buy animal-free dairy milk, I think is always really interesting to us. And so a lot of the post-purchase experience right now, this early on in our company, is actually just like getting feedback and insights from customers, especially ones who are buying the product and then buying it again. We had somebody who bought a 12 pack of our combo pack, right? Which you get chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry. You get to try all three, figure out which one you like. And then they ordered 7 cases of strawberry after that. It's like,
oh my gosh,
we have to talk to that person, because we obviously know they love strawberry milk, but like, again, understanding why Bored Cow and why animal-free dairy is really important to us. And so we're spending a lot of time just chatting with folks right now. We just launched a consumer research initiative where a customer experience team is actually getting on the phone with our sort of super buyers and starting to figure out, like, what was it that made you add this product to checkout? What made you buy it again? What made you leave that great review? What made you spend, buy a 12 pack of milk online, which is like not a normal thing to do, we're trying to make it a normal thing to do, but like, historically not normal. And so spending a lot of time on that. And also, like, not just trying to, in terms of like what we think about when we think about retention, it's not just about, for us, getting folks to buy the product again, although obviously that is great, and that's ultimately the goal of any, direct to consumer slash consumer brand. But also just like getting people on our team. It is just as powerful for somebody to post an Instagram story to their friends saying, hey, I'm trying animal-free dairy milk for the first time. Here's what it is. Here's why I bought it. I love that. Is just as valuable, if not more valuable, than that person, silently buying another 12-pack. And so I think a lot of our post-purchase experience is also about trying to motivate, encourage, and incentivize, people to start advocating for our brand, because, again, we're the first animal-free dairy milk to the market in the US. And so we need that help, and we need those, like, we need that allyship with our early customer base. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of our like areas of focus right now with regard to post-purchase.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I love the allyship, like, get that UGC, get that customer feedback wherever you can, because especially as a younger brand that is trying to find out what's resonating with customers, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And so you totally, yes, answer my question of like, what is important to you in the post-purchase journey? Like, what are you trying to find out? What information are you trying to give? And I think the like surveys. So do you have like pop-up surveys and whatnot? Can you tell us like, how are you actually getting that information? Just like a little bit more of the tactical side, in case anyone who's listening is like, oh, we should be doing the same thing.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, we have a couple of different ways that we collect consumer insights. Even pre-purchase, and even for people who don't purchase, we have exit surveys on the website. If somebody looks around and ultimately decides not to purchase, we ask them why, because we are obviously very curious. Was it price? Was there information you couldn't find, that you needed in order to make a decision? Did you decide that there's an ingredient that, you're allergic to, or you're not interested in, or something? And so we ask a lot of those questions because it's just as important for us to learn from the people who don't become our customers as the ones that do. But then, post-purchase, it's simple things like, incentivizing people to write a review for 15% off their next purchase. Mostly it's just so we can learn what people's personal experience is, who they are, who they're buying it for. There's sort of like questions that we ask as part of the review process that I think are really valuable for us to see. Like, if somebody is in California and they're buying for their kids, their review is going to look very different than somebody in Chicago who's just buying for themselves, right? And so we want to be able to understand like why they bought it, who it was for, and then obviously what they thought. And then, like I said, we're also starting to reach out to multiple sort of pack purchasers to speak to them one-to-one on the phone, and then obviously surprising and delighting them on the back end of that, to reward them for the time that they took, which is obviously incredibly valuable to us and to them. And so those are the primary tools right now, and we're always looking for new ways to source feedback. I mean, we're actually in the middle of a reformulation right now that is completely driven by consumer feedback that we've received over the last few months about like, hey, I love this product, but there's this one thing that I wish you would change, and so those sorts of, we're obviously beginning to see that data on a macro level. And so like starting to see trends like, okay, a lot of, there's a certain contingent of folks who like don't like the taste of stevia. And so like, can we replace stevia with something without, without adding too much sugar or whatever? And so those sorts of things are completely driven by pre and post purchase consumer surveying and insights gathering. We also use platforms like Suzy to do some like more scaled digital consumer research, that helps inform decisions that we make, about the formula, about messaging, about UX. Like all of that stuff is people informed, because we want to obviously eliminate all of the biases we have, and we also want to make sure that the customer is in the conversation with us for every major decision we're making across the board.
Oh, that's really cool. I love hearing about product iteration from, just customer feedback. I always think it's so interesting because, if you're so in depth on a product, like you can drive yourself insane being like, but
Totally.
what are we missing? Right. And
Yeah,
one
yeah,
consumer might be like, it's just this. And you're like, oh my God, there it is. Right. Like,
yeah,
or what is like really hitting home. Like if you're
yeah,
so close, it's hard sometimes to take that step back and
yeah, yeah,
see that macro view, but it just might be like a consumer or two that you talk to and you're like, oh my God, there it is. Like the light bulb goes off.
yeah. There's also this really interesting like vocal minority effect that happens where you'll see a lot of people in comments, talking about something, that they don't like or whatever. But when you actually do broader consumer research, you actually realize it is a very small percentage of people who really care about that thing. They're just very vocal about it because they care about it a
Yeah.
lot, but like really 98% of people aren't concerned with that thing. And so it also helps you sort of eliminate the bias of like, okay, we're receiving like a bunch of negative comments, about this thing, but like actually when you look at the bigger picture, most people are totally fine with that, and so that's really helpful too, because that can drive your decision making into wrong directions potentially if you're listening to something that most people don't actually care about. When you have so little time and bandwidth and resources to prioritize, what are the most important things for us to take care of right now. Looking at that bigger picture helps you, and looking from multiple sources helps you figure out, okay, what is actually at the root of this.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. I love that you brought up like your perspective can be skewed like from wherever you're standing. Right. And so being able to take a step back and see like, oh, is this a majority or minority that really think this about our product or this about branding or whatever
Yeah, yeah,
um people are expressing concern or, it could be also like somewhat like people love this about your
exactly,
product. And then you're
exactly,
like, oh,
100%.
like we should really like ramp that up. And then it's like, oh, wait, that wasn't majority, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. It goes both ways. And so like the goal is to figure out like, okay, what are the like the vocal minority groups that like things, that don't like things, but like what does the majority actually care about? Because what we are trying to do is make animal-free dairy milk appeal to the masses. The only way that we are going to solve our mission of ending factory farming and transitioning, meat and dairy away from animal-based to animal-free is if the masses adopt this, right? And so we have to optimize in some ways for what the most amount of people care about, because our mission is sort of that big. And while
Mm-hmm.
we always listen to everybody, it is important to figure out, yeah, sort of like what are the biggest priorities to actually moving the needle on our mission.
Yes. Yeah. I love that distinction too. Very admirable as well, where it's like it's in good faith that you want to achieve this mission and support the world and support people and support animals. And so I love that it's like, okay, yes, we still listen to everyone, but we have that distinction where it's like, okay, what is propelling the mission forward? And
Yeah,
that is, how is that aligning with our consumer base?
yeah.
I think
And
it's a
it's all
really,
about just
it comes across.
ordering, yeah, and arranging priorities, right? Because it's like
Yeah.
everything that customer tells is a priority, right? But it's like, what is the number one priority? If we have time to address two or three things, what should those two or three things be over the next few months? And then we'll revisit the stuff, that is less of a priority, when we have the time, bandwidth, the resources to do so. And so, yeah, it's all about just figuring out like what will move the needle the quickest in terms of um, making product adoption happen at scale.
Yes. Yeah. I love that. Okay. One, I know we're coming up on time. So one little last thing, it's a very seasonal question, that we've been asking people is prep for Black Friday, Cyber Monday. It is coming up. We are recording this literally like a week out. And
Yeah,
so I'm assuming hopefully like most of the strategy is kind of at play. It's just really waiting and seeing like
yeah.
how the actual holiday goes down. How's it been prepping for the holidays?
It's been good. I mean, I think we acknowledge that like, dairy products are not at the top of people's Christmas lists. Most people
I
are
mean,
not.
now having tried it, I want it to
I
be.
love it.
So
No, honestly, we're so happy to hear that. And it's why we are, activating for Black Friday and Cyber Monday, but we also understand like, this is not a conventional sort of
Stocking
gift.
stuffer. Yeah.
And so it's more about like, we're really inspired by brands that do something really fun and interesting and memorable on Black Friday,
Mm,
Cyber Monday weekend. And so like, we're trying to create something that's fun and engaging. Of course, our brand is all around like, you mentioned it earlier, like adding the puzzles and mazes and games to our insert that goes into every box of Bored Cow that's sent to everybody. In the spirit of that, we're going to do this like really fun prize wheel where like you have, a 1 in 100 chance to get 100% off. And like, there's all sorts of other like big, ticket sort of discount codes and things that you can win. And so, it's our first attempt at figuring out like, what does it mean to have an annual Black Friday strategy that like people anticipate and sort of wait for? I think, brands like Cards Against Humanity have sort of like pioneered we're just gonna do something really fun and creative and totally uniquely us on Black Friday, Cyber Monday. We're not just gonna push out, a coupon code. We're not just gonna pass out a deal. We're gonna try to create an experience that escalates and gets better every year. And so, this is our this is our planting our flag, saying like this is what Bored Friday looks like, for us.
ah, oh, I love that. And also like the abbreviation BF is
Yeah,
still the same. Okay.
exactly.
That's really cool. This will be going out to after the holiday season. So if that was a worry at all, but
Oh no,
I'm
not at
at
all.
that.
I hope it went well.
Yeah, no, that's oh my gosh. Yeah, after this all right thing.
Right.
It went so well. We're manifesting it.
Love it.
No, that's a really cool idea. I love the Cards Against Humanity example too. We had real quick, we had another guest come on, Paddle Smash, combination of like round net and pickleball. And
Yeah.
they had also brought up like Cards Against Humanity for being like pioneers in the game space. So really interesting also to hear your take on like their approach being pioneers in the Black Friday, Cyber Monday space. And I think that's more fun too, right?
Totally.
Like switch it up. More entertaining for you all, I'm sure too, just like having to be creative with the approach. So that's really cool. I'm excited to see it this fall. Yeah.
Us too.
Yeah. This has been great though, Luke. Thank you so much for coming on,
welcome.
representing Bored Cow, telling us more. We usually focus on retention and sometimes dive a little bit deeper into it, which this episode we didn't do straightforwardly, but educating the customer and everything that we talked about around just really having your branding sticking out and your messaging all feeds into retention. So this has been wonderful. Totally. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. And I had a great time. And I love what y'all do. So
thank you. We'll take that.
All right.